It was a morning like any other in São Paulo. The sun had just risen, casting a soft orange hue over the skyscrapers as the city slowly woke from its slumber. Ricardo, a veteran taxi driver, had been on the road for hours. Driving early in the morning had its advantages: less traffic and a better chance of picking up a few fares before the chaos of the day began. Ricardo was in his 50s, with graying hair and a neatly trimmed mustache. He had been driving for the same taxi company for over 20 years. By this point, everything was second nature to him. He expected nothing to change. As he navigated the streets in his yellow taxi, with the radio playing softly in the background, his mind wandered as usual. His shift had been quiet so far, just a few routine rides. But then the piercing sound of his taxi dispatcher interrupted the calm. "Hey, Ricardo, you there? I've got a pickup for you," said the dispatcher, his voice crackling over the radio.
Avenida Paulista, Nir Rua 45.
Passenger waiting. Ricardo sighed. "All right, I'm on my way," he responded, turning the wheel with an experienced hand as he headed towards the address. His mood began to sour. Avenida Paulista was downtown, but the area was near a part of the city Ricardo didn't like driving through. In his biased mind, he thought, people from there don't tip well. He had already made assumptions about his passenger without even seeing them. When Ricardo pulled up to the designated spot, he saw a well-dressed black man standing on the sidewalk, holding a leather briefcase and checking his phone. The man was wearing an elegant suit, clearly prepared for the day ahead. He looked up as Ricardo's taxi approached and gave a polite nod of acknowledgement. Ricardo's eyes narrowed. A flash of discomfort ran through him, born of his own ingrained prejudices. Without a second thought, he rolled down the passenger side window. "I think you'd better call another taxi," Ricardo said, his voice cold and disdainful. The man, maintaining his composure, raised an eyebrow in confusion. "I'm sorry, I was told this taxi would pick me up. I've been waiting here," the man replied, his tone calm but with a hint of firmness. Ricardo shrugged indifferently. "There must have been a mix-up. I can't take you, try another taxi." Without giving the man a chance to respond, Ricardo rolled up the window and drove off, leaving the man alone on the curb. As Ricardo pulled away, a small sense of satisfaction flickered inside him. In his mind, he had avoided trouble. Ricardo continued navigating the busy streets of São Paulo, feeling smug about his decision. He had been doing this job long enough to believe he knew who was worth picking up and who wasn't. Little did he know, however, that this particular decision would come back to haunt him. A week later, a big buzz spread through the taxi company where Ricardo worked. Rumors were circulating that the company had been sold and a new owner was taking over. There was talk of restructuring, new rules, and a possible overhaul of the workforce. Ricardo brushed it off as just another management change. After 2 decades behind the wheel, he had seen ownership change hands a few times before, and it had never made much difference to him. As long as he could keep driving and getting his paycheck, he wasn't too concerned. But this time, things felt different. The company announced a mandatory meeting for all drivers at headquarters. The new owner would introduce himself and lay out his vision for the company. Reluctantly, Ricardo showed up, more annoyed than curious. He resented the lost time picking up passengers, and as he stood outside the building with some of the other drivers, he could feel the tension in the air. "Have you heard anything about this new guy?" one of the drivers asked, glancing nervously around. "Yeah, I heard he's a young, successful businessman. Supposedly, he's planning a complete overhaul of how we operate," another driver chimed in. Ricardo rolled his eyes. "Great, just what we need, more corporate nonsense." The meeting room at the company's headquarters was packed with drivers, all waiting to see what this new owner had in store. Ricardo found a seat in the back, arms crossed, his expression one of thinly veiled irritation. When the general manager took the stage, the room fell silent. "Good morning, everyone," the manager began. "Thank you all for coming. As you've probably heard, our company was recently acquired by a new owner. He's here today to introduce himself and share his vision for the future. Please welcome Mr. Enrique Machado." Ricardo's ears perked up at the name Enrique Machado. It sounded familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. That is, until the new owner stepped up to the podium. The man standing at the front of the room was the same well-dressed black man Ricardo had refused to pick up just a week earlier. Enrique was wearing another elegant suit, looking every bit the successful businessman. He scanned the room briefly. For a fleeting moment, his eyes met Ricardo's. Enrique smiled, but there was something behind that smile, a tacit acknowledgement of the moment they had shared. "Good morning, everyone," Enrique began, his voice calm but authoritative. "I want to start by saying how excited I am to be here, to be a part of this company. We're about to embark on a new journey together, and I hope to take this company to new heights. But before we get into that, I want to share a personal story." Ricardo shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his palms beginning to sweat. He had a feeling he knew where this story was going. "Last week," Enrique continued, "I was standing on Avenida Paulista, waiting for a taxi I had called. The driver arrived, but when he saw me, he decided not to take me as a passenger. He told me I should call another taxi. I stood there, wondering why I was treated that way, and it made me think deeply about the kind of culture we have here." The room was silent. Ricardo felt his heart race, his face flushing with heat as he realized that all eyes would soon be on him. "We all make mistakes," Enrique said, his voice firm and composed. "But there's one thing I won't tolerate in this company: prejudice. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are, where they come from, or what they look like. Our passengers trust us to get them to their destination safely, and we owe them respect. Starting today, we'll be implementing new policies and training to ensure that respect is at the core of everything we do." Enrique paused, allowing his words to sink in. "Those who can't adapt to this new culture will need to find work elsewhere," he concluded. Ricardo's stomach dropped. His head spun as he processed what had just been said. He knew, without a doubt, that Enrique's story was about him, and that his job was now at risk. In the days that followed, the taxi company underwent a complete transformation. Mandatory diversity and sensitivity training sessions were implemented for all employees, and drivers were required to attend workshops on customer service and bias awareness. For Ricardo, it was a nightmare. He had spent years working without thinking about how his attitudes could affect the people he served. Now, he was being forced to confront the same prejudices he had harbored for years. During one of the training sessions, the instructor said something that deeply resonated with Ricardo, despite his resistance. "Treating people with respect isn't just good for business, it's the right thing to do. We're all human, and we all deserve dignity." For the first time, Ricardo began to reflect on his behavior. He thought about all the passengers he had judged based on their appearance, income level, or background, and realized just how deeply flawed his mindset had been. The more he thought about it, the more ashamed he felt. Meanwhile, Enrique continued to make his presence felt at the company. He visited dispatch centers, spoke with drivers, and even rode along with some of them to get a first-hand experience of day-to-day operations. Despite their shared history, Enrique was always cordial with Ricardo, never mentioning the incident on Avenida Paulista. But every time Ricardo saw him, it was a reminder of the mistake he had made. Months passed, and slowly, Ricardo began to change. At first, it was a struggle. Old habits and prejudices are hard to break. But he started making an effort to treat all passengers with respect, regardless of their race or background. He stopped making assumptions based on appearances and found that, most of the time, his passengers were just like him, people trying to get through the day. The company changed as well. Under Enrique's leadership, it became known for its excellent customer service, and the new culture of respect and equality began to attract more business. Drivers who had once resisted the changes began to see the benefits, both personally and professionally. One sunny afternoon, as Ricardo sat in his taxi outside the company headquarters, waiting for his next fare, Enrique approached him. Ricardo's heart skipped a beat as Enrique tapped on the window and opened the door. "Mind if I ride with you for a bit?" Enrique asked with a friendly smile. Ricardo nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Of course, Mr. Machado, hop in." As they drove through the busy streets of Sao Paulo, Enrique chatted casually, asking Ricardo about his experiences and how things were going with the new changes. To Ricardo's surprise, the conversation flowed easily. At the end of the ride, Enrique turned to Ricardo and said with a knowing smile, "We all make mistakes, Ricardo. What matters is what we do afterward." Ricardo nodded, his voice low but sincere. "I'm trying to get better." Enrique patted him on the shoulder before stepping out of the taxi. "That's all I ask." As Ricardo drove away, he realized that the journey to becoming a better person wasn't over, it was just beginning. Disclaimer. This channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here aim to promote reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all individuals. Watch another story that appears on your screen now. You'll like it.